I'm very interested to hear your take on, firstly, on the next legal, just if we could start maybe, Tracey, with the legal side. So this decision has now been made by the Oireachtas, but then it has to be notified to the President of the EU Parliament, I think, and that's a process that's going to take a bit of time. Is there anything at all legally? Is there any instrument at all? Because there's a lot of confusion out there, and I want to kind of clear that up. That can be done at this stage.
So first of all, I think we're aware that there has been potentially 2 legal actions that have been taken by separate plaintiffs, Michelle Keene and Una McGurk. So they both took injunctions to try and stop the government from, number 1, I believe, holding the vote, and number 2, from opting into the EU Migration Pact, as you say, whereby they have to notify the European Parliament or the European Council that they intend to opt in. As I understand it, Michelle Keene's legal case has been unsuccessful, but as I understand it, Una McGurk's case is still ongoing. So there is still a potential that Una may be able to secure an injunction that would stop the government from opting in. The first point that I would note is, and
even though the vote has gone through? Even
though the vote has gone through. Well, to be honest with you, in my opinion, I didn't think that it was ever going to be possible to stop the vote happening, because obviously in this country, under the Constitution, we have the separation of powers, which is meant to be a checks and balances between the different organs of the state, that each can't interfere in the other. So what that would mean is that the judiciary couldn't interfere with the role of the Oireachtas, or the legislator or the executive, in relation to policy matters, or in relation to the likes of the vote, the EU Migration Pact vote. So I didn't think it was ever going to be possible to stop that vote taking place, because that's a decision of the Oireachtas to hold that vote. So I would always have thought that if somebody was seeking an injunction, it would have to be after the vote had taken place, but before we actually opted into the pact. Because once we opt into the pact, there's a potential that under the Constitution, as part of the Lisbon referendum, this clause that we agreed to, the necessitated obligations clause, would be triggered, which says that EU law is supreme over Irish law in certain limited circumstances. So my fear would be that once the government formally opt in to the EU Migration Pact, it may not be possible after that to stop it from happening. But
the formality of that requires the government now to notify the EU that we're going to opt in. But what's the time gap between now and then? Do you have any idea?
The only information I have on that is just a comment that Helen McEntee, where she said that it would take a couple of weeks. Okay. But at the same time, I'm not sure how much credence we should give to that statement, because at one point we thought the vote was happening today, then we thought it was happening tomorrow, then we thought it was happening at 11 o'clock at night, and then it ends up happening at 8:30. So I think an awful lot of the time they might say certain things and we will hang on those statements, and then something else happens that actually, makes something that we're trying to do redundant. So she has commented that it would take a couple of weeks, but there's no firm commitment that that's actually correct.